Widely regarded as one of the best Doctor Who stories ever, Heaven Sent challenged the traditional formula of the show by giving almost all of its screen time to star Peter Capaldi, who did an amazing job carrying the story on his own, as well as praise being given to the creature design, set design, and to Stephen Moffat's writing. When an episode is as beloved as this one, and when it's so different to everything else in the series, there are always behind-the-scenes stories and fascinating trivia attached to it. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with Who Culture, here with 20 things you didn't know about Heaven Sent. Number 20. The cycles didn't last as long as you think. It's difficult to gauge how long each version of the Doctor spends in the castle before the cycle resets and he does it all over again. The Doctor says it'll take a day and a half to drag his dying body to the top of the tower, so that's one small indication of the time he spent there. But how long was he there in total? Well, according to Moffat, the answer isn't as crazy as you might think. He said, "In my head, the Doctor is in the castle for several weeks. I assume it varies depending on how the rooms rearrange, but it's probably about 3 weeks. If each cycle takes 3 weeks and the Doctor is in the confession dial for 4.5 billion years overall, that's a frankly insane amount of resets required to break the wall." Number 19. Rachel Talalay's inspiration. Heaven Sent was directed by Rachel Talalay, a Chicago-born filmmaker who also directed Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. But let's not hold that against her, eh? Talalay, who also directed Capaldi's other series finales, plus his overall finale Twice Upon a Time, did a fantastic job creating the suspense needed to pull off an episode like this. But where did she get her inspiration from? Apparently, she went back and watched German expressionist movies from the early 20th century to get visual help, from titles like Nosferatu: A Symphony of Horror to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's astonishing the amount of care and effort that went into creating this hour of Saturday night telly. Number 18. Titles in other languages. Though it's got a reputation as being more British than a bulldog wearing a top hat eating a tea-covered scone, Doctor Who is a global show with a global audience. That means it has to be translated into other languages, which can offer a unique insight into how an episode is perceived. Heaven Sent was called many different things around the world. In France, its title translated to Descent into Heaven. In German, the name came out as The Fear of the Doctor, which is very interesting. Elsewhere, Hungarian viewers got an episode called Second of Eternity, which someone should definitely steal. Number 17. Those are actually Peter Capaldi's skulls. How many times has the Doctor died in a single episode of Doctor Who? Heaven Sent has to hold that record, as the Time Lord spends 4.5 billion years getting repeatedly bumped off by a bloke in a bedsheet. As a result, the castle the Doctor is trapped in is littered with various copies of his own skull. And that statement is actually more true than you might think. That's because Peter Capaldi's own head was used as the model for those skulls. It was taken from a life-size cast made of the actor for the Ghost Doctor in Under the Lake and Before the Flood. Don't ever say Doctor Who doesn't take small details seriously, because that is some serious attention to detail. Number 16. It was too long for BBC America. Even though it didn't have to be translated to be shown in the USA, Heaven Sent did need to undergo some changes for an American audience. BBC America runs commercials as part of its programs, so it usually dedicates an hour to Doctor Who, 45 minutes for the show, 15 minutes or so for adverts. However, Heaven Sent is 54 minutes long, which is way too long for a commercial hour, but instead of cutting scenes, they simply showed it at a slightly faster speed. Fortunately, they then gave it 75 minutes during the following week's rerun. Number 15. Moffat was driven by his dissatisfaction with an earlier plotline. The Amy and Rory storyline received some criticism in its latter half, with some fans feeling that their breakup felt contrived and others unhappy that the show never truly explored the grief they must have felt after losing Melody in A Good Man Goes to War. There you go, folks. Did you really think we could do a video without me mentioning River Song at least once? Moffat was also dissatisfied with how he handled the loss of Melody and its impact on the ponds, and Heaven Sent actually came from his desire to do that kind of loss and grief aftermath correctly. He said, "Usually big dramatic things happen in Doctor Who, then the next week everyone's absolutely fine. I never found a way to have Amy and Rory grieve over their lost baby, and I still don't know how I would do that. I could never work out how to write that, so I just cut forward several months and rather ducked the issue. So getting that kind of aftermath right in Doctor Who was on my to-do list." Imagine being so determined to correct one of your biggest regrets that you casually write one one of the greatest Doctor Who episodes ever. What a guy. Number 14. The Veil was trying to be nice. The Blogs of Doom were a series of short stories published in Doctor Who magazine by prolific Who fiction writer Jonathan Morris. They offered up some ideas about some of the show's minor characters, including the Veil. According to Morris, the hooded harbinger of doom might not have been so bad after all. In his story, the Veil is just trying to do its job. It doesn't want to hurt the Doctor, in fact it wants to help him. It makes numerous attempts to point out a spade the Doctor could use to knock down the diamond wall, but to no avail. Should we consider this canon? Well, that's up to you, but it's really fascinating either way. Number 13. The unusual spoon mistake. What is it with the 12th Doctor and spoons? He used one to fight Robin Hood, and now there's this. The man's obsessed. When the Doctor is eating some soup, he gets distracted and drops the spoon in the bowl. The close-up of this happening is meant to be for dramatic effect, but it accidentally reveals a mistake so strange that it got a whole Radio Times article to itself. When the spoon has fallen, you can see a second one just behind it, complete with another person's arm holding it up. What was the purpose of the second arm and the second spoon? Was this spoon to perform the drip while Capaldi dropped the main one, or was it the confession dial playing tricks on our hero? It's spooky. Number 12. It took up a quarter of the Series 9 soundtrack. The Series 9 soundtrack is the perfect gift for anyone, even if they don't watch Doctor Who. Seriously, just give it to them. It's a 4-disc set that showcases some of composer Murray Gold's best work from across 2015, and one of those discs is devoted entirely to the music of Heaven Sent. Some episodes from the series are lucky to have one song featured in the collection, but Heaven Sent got over 40 minutes dedicated to it. It's an episode that relies heavily on its atmosphere, and a large part of that is the music, so it's no surprise that there was so much material. I'm just glad we got all of it. Number 11. The Veil was played by a familiar face. Apart from a brief appearance by Jenna Coleman as Clara, the only actors in Heaven Sent are Peter Capaldi and Jamie Reed Quarrell. Reed Quarrell plays the Veil and does a great job bringing the silent menace to life, but this wasn't the first time Doctor Who audiences had seen his work. In fact, he appeared earlier in this same series playing Colony Sarf, an agent of Davros who was made up of snakes in The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. Playing 2 memorable villains in one series? That's gotta be some sort of record. Number 10. IMDB loves it. Ah, the Internet Movie Database. Where would we be without you? As well as showcasing trailers, cast lists, and nerdy trivia, IMDb also hands out ratings to films and TV shows. It's done this for Doctor Who, and Heaven Sent comes out very well indeed. Of all the episodes since the 2005 revival, Heaven Sent currently ranks number 2 with a score of 9.6. That means it beat out both parts of the library story, but came up short against Blink, which tops the list with a 9.8 out of 10. Wait a second, does that mean Moffat has the entire top 4 to himself? That's not good for his ego. Number 9. Its unique opening credits. The Doctor Who opening credits are just as famous as anything else from the show. The names of the actors playing the Doctor and the companions flash up on screen while the TARDIS travels through some variation of the time vortex. Iconic stuff. But what about when there's no companion? Heaven Sent is the first New Who episode to only feature one actor's name in the opening sequence. Even though Jenna Coleman does make an appearance, Peter Capaldi does the heavy lifting and therefore gets to hog the spotlight. It makes you wonder why Catherine Tate was credited in the opening sequence for Midnight, despite only bookending the episode with 2 short scenes. Wouldn't it be interesting to be a fly on the wall for some of these conversations between the showrunners? Number 8. Many shots were filmed many times. Rachel Talalay did a damn fine job on this episode, especially considering how much stress she was under. The director had to get this incredibly tricky episode spot on, all the while having Moffat in her ear telling her to do things she'd already done. Talalay was instructed to record the same shots multiple times, but slightly differently. This was so they could be used in scenes showing later iterations of the Doctor's journey to Room 12. Why did they have to be different? Well, because each trip around the castle was different. This made each of the rapid-fire cycles at the end of the episode feel slightly distinct, as they probably would be. Number 7. It broke a bizarre Moffat record. Series 9 was Stephen Moffat's 5th series as Doctor Who showrunner, and it ended up breaking a record when it came to his writing. Up to this point, the penultimate episode of every Moffat series had featured the Cybermen. They were part of the Alliance in the Pandorica Opens, and one of them terrorized Amy Pond earlier in the episode. They annoyed James Corden in closing time, they chased the Doctor around a theme theme park in Nightmare in Silver and were at the command of Missy in Dark Water. As for Heaven Sent, not a single murderous cyborg to be found. The penultimate episode from the next series, Series 10's World Enough and Time, does have the Cybermen in it, so Heaven Sent really does stand alone. Number 6. It might not have happened. Can you imagine a world where Heaven Sent didn't exist? Series 9 would be remembered a lot differently, that's for sure. Clara Oswald was originally meant to die in the series finale, which is in keeping with how Doctor Who has done companion departures in the past. However, Moffat decided that her death would be more impactful if it happened earlier, and so brought it forward to episode 10, which became Face the Raven. As the events of Heaven Sent follow on from Clara's demise, the episode might not have happened if she'd been off in the series finale, because, well, that would be the final episode of the series. Alternatively, Moffat could have written it as a festive special, which would have made Christmas Day 2015 a very depressing affair indeed. Number 5. It could have been a Big Finish story. God bless Big Finish Productions. This company has been making excellent Doctor Who audio dramas since 1999, helping to fill in the gaps and provide a time-travelling fix when the show is off the air. Though there's no visual element, Big Finish stories can be just as compelling as those that play out on TV. And in an alternate reality, we would have got an audio-only version of Heaven Sent. Moffat originally dreamt up the idea of the transmat, the thing that makes clones of the Doctor, for a Big Finish story he was considering submitting in the late 90s. But of course this never happened, and he held onto the idea until 2015 instead. Number 4. The castle had been seen before. Because constantly changing castles don't exist in the real world, the Doctor Who team had to use regular old castles to film Heaven Sent in. The two they chose, Caerphilly Castle and Cardiff Castle, had both appeared in Doctor Who before. Caerphilly Castle was used as certain parts of the acid factory in The Rebel Flesh and the Almost People, and also for some of the underground tunnel scenes in The Vampires of Venice. Cardiff Castle was also used in The Rebel Flesh and was also seen in the Torchwood episode Exit Wounds. Has any other show done more for Welsh tourism than Doctor Who? I don't think so. Number 3. The monster was supposed to be different. During a watch-along of Heaven Sent in 2020, Moffat revealed something very interesting about the veil. It very nearly never existed. Originally, the plan was to use another of his creations as the Doctor's pursuer in Heaven Sent, a weeping angel. Moffat tweeted out that this was the initial plan for the episode and that he'd forgotten that this was what he was going to do. While the angels are cracking villains, it was definitely the right choice to go with something new here. Wouldn't it have been very easy for the angels to catch the Doctor considering how fast they move? The veil was fresh, mysterious and creepy and was the perfect monster for this story. Number 2. What happened on the first few cycles? When we first see the Doctor stuck inside the confession dial, he's already been there for a long time. So what was he up to when the cameras weren't rolling? What happened on the very first cycle, and who left the clues leading the Doctor to room 12? Stephen Moffat has the answers. In Doctor Who magazine's production notes, Moffat said that the Doctor was ancient by the time he'd first worked out how to escape the castle. That means he was a very, very old man when he first started punching the wall. Furthermore, another ancient version of the Doctor never punched the wall at all. This Doctor, realizing that future versions of himself would need to find room 12 much quicker, scratched "I am in 12" in as many places as he could and hoped that some of these messages survived the castle's reset. This version of the Doctor also wrote "I am 12" on the back of Clara's portrait, and this too survived the reset. But in Moffat's own words, the Doctor draws too much strength from her smile ever to turn her face to the wall. Just when you thought this episode couldn't get any sadder. Oh. Number 1. Moffat knew the cliffhanger well in advance. Some of Stephen Moffat's story arcs felt made up on the fly, but the man had impeccable planning skills when it came to Heaven Sent. In an interview with Doctor Who magazine in June 2014, the writer hinted at a whopper of a cliffhanger coming up. That cliffhanger would eventually be Heaven Sent, which was broadcast almost 18 months after this interview, where the Doctor returns to Gallifrey. In other words, Moffat had figured out how Heaven Sent was going to end while he was still working on Series 8. That's how far in advance this man's mind works. Very impressive. And that's everything for this list, but we've taken some deep dives into other singular episodes before, so why not check out 20 Things You Didn't Know About Blink, or 20 Things You Didn't Know About the Day of the Doctor. They'll be linked on the screen somewhere. But in the meantime, I've been Ellie with Who Culture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.